Whispers beneath Loch Ness. The wind rolled off the highlands like a ghost's sigh, cold and ancient. It carried with it the scent of moss and peat, and something older, something that had slept for centuries beneath the black waters of Loch Ness. Dr. Alara Byrne stood at the edge of the loch, wrapped tightly in her waxed jacket. The collar turned high against the autumn chill. A soft mist clung to the surface of the water, rippling only where the current stirred it. Somewhere, a loon cried, its mournful call echoing across the stillness. Ilara was not a believer. She had come to the highlands not to chase myths, but to debunk them. A cryptozoologist with a doctorate in evolutionary biology from Oxford, her specialty was explaining the unexplainable. Giant squids, deep-sea anomalies, rumors of prehistoric beasts. She had seen and rationalized them all. But Loch Ness had always gnawed at her curiosity. Not because she believed in Nessie, but because no one had convincingly disproven it. The stories, the blurry photos, the sonar pings, the ancient Highland legends, all of it smacked of hysteria and hoax. But one thing kept her coming back: the silence of the deep. Sonar scans never penetrated far enough. The loch was nearly 230 meters deep at points, and its murky waters defied clarity. If there was something down there, it would remain hidden unless it chose to be seen. Her base of operations was a small, stone cottage owned by an old family friend, located just off the shores near Dorez. The locals were friendly, but evasive. At the pub, they spoke of Nessie with a mixture of reverence and fear, quickly changing the subject whenever the conversation veered too close to the old stories. Only one person seemed willing to speak in detail: Duncan MacLeod, an 84-year-old man with a face carved by wind and whiskey. He sat near the fire most nights, puffing on a curved briar pipe, his eyes fixed on things only he could see. "It ain't a beast," he said one night, voice rough as gravel. "Not like the papers say, not a dinosaur, not some big eel. It's older, smarter, and it don't like being disturbed." Ilara raised an eyebrow. "What is it then?" Duncan took a long draw from his pipe and leaned in close. "A guardian. A curse. A memory of the loch itself." She almost laughed, but there was something in his eyes, an ancient fear, deep-set and immovable, that made her pause. That night, she reviewed the latest sonar readings taken from her small research boat. The images were as inconclusive as always. Strange shapes, sudden temperature shifts, unexplained shadows. But something odd caught her attention. Near the bottom of the loch, past the normal scan range, there appeared a fissure, a crevice she had never seen before, marked by a sudden dip in pressure and a magnetic anomaly. Ilara made a note. She would take the boat out at dawn. At 5:12 a.m., the mist was still thick, swallowing sound and space alike. Ilara pushed her boat quietly into the water, her equipment packed and secured. As the electric motor hummed to life, she set a course toward the coordinates of the fissure. For the first 30 minutes, nothing changed. The loch was as lifeless as always. But as she neared the site, the instruments began to twitch. Erratic pulses of sonar interference, strange magnetometer spikes. Then the water shifted. A low vibration pulsed through the hull. It was subtle at first, like the hum of a distant engine. But it grew and grew. The surface of the loch trembled. Birds took off from the shoreline in a frenzy. Alara leaned over the side, and the water suddenly calmed. Too calm. Then, without warning, something breached the surface 20 meters to her left. It was massive. Not a neck, not a head, not flippers, but a dome, smooth and dark like obsidian, glistening with brackish water. It rose slowly, impossibly, and then vanished beneath the waves without a sound. Alara's heart pounded. She checked the instruments. Everything was dead. Sonar, GPS, radio, fried. She turned the boat around, but the motor sputtered and died. Dead silence. Not even the wind stirred now. Then she heard it. A whisper, not in the air but inside her head. Go back. She spun around. Nothing. But the voice remained. Low, ancient, heavy with warning. You have seen. That is enough. Alara gripped the edge of the boat, her knuckles white with fear. The voice in her head faded, but its echo lingered, as though it had etched itself into the walls of her mind. Then, as suddenly as it had all stopped, the equipment blinked back to life. The GPS stuttered, sonar began its slow sweep, and the electric motor whirred faintly before stabilizing. She sat frozen, heart hammering, staring into the now still waters. No ripples, no evidence of the breach, only the digital log of spiking magnetism and a single sonar snapshot of the dome. It wasn't possible, but it had happened. Back at the cottage, Alara backed up her data twice, then 3 times, then stared at the sonar image for hours. She played with color settings, contrast, filters, trying to convince herself it was a submerged boulder or air bubble. But the symmetrical curve, the sheer scale of it, told another story. The fissure was real. The breach was real. And the voice? She barely slept. The next day, Duncan approached her at the pub. His eyes were dark with knowing. You saw it. She nodded slowly. Duncan motioned for her to follow, and they walked in silence to the far edge of the loch. He stopped at a standing stone, carved with weathered Celtic spirals. Moss grew along its base. Without looking at her, he spoke. There's a reason they stopped searching. Not because they stopped believing, but because they were warned. Warned by what? Duncan looked up. By the Bian nach Dub, the Black Blessing, old Highland magic tied to water. Before the Christians came, they knew the loch held something sacred. Not evil, not good, just ancient. It protects, but it punishes. Alara frowned. Punishes what? Curiosity. That night, Alara couldn't stay away. The pull of the fissure gnawed at her. She told herself it was science, a chance to discover something extraordinary. But deep down, she knew it was something else. Obsession. She returned to the boat with diving gear, sonar, and a high-intensity light system. If the creature was real, if the fissure led somewhere, she would see it with her own eyes. The descent was slow. Murky water swallowed the light within 10 meters. At 40 meters, the temperature dropped rapidly. She watched her instruments carefully. At 75 meters, the fissure appeared on the sonar again, wider now, like a yawning mouth. At 90 meters, her light struck something massive. Stone. No, not stone. architecture. Carved stone pillars jutted from the lake bed, worn by time but unmistakably shaped. Celtic symbols, crude faces, spiral patterns. A submerged ruin. Alara felt her breath hitch in the regulator. Her descent halted just above the lake bed, at the edge of a narrow passage leading into darkness. She activated the helmet cam. As her lights swept across the entrance, a shape darted past. Not fish, not eel. It moved with purpose. Then the whisper returned. "You should not be here." A vibration, like a heartbeat, pulsed through the water. The lake bed stirred, silt swirling around her. Alara turned to ascend, but the passage behind her was dark, darker than the water should allow. Shapes moved within it, eyes, dozens of them. Return what was taken. She didn't understand. She hadn't taken anything. The whispers grew louder, insistent. Return the blood. Suddenly, the ruin began to shake. A deep, groaning sound reverberated through the loch, as if some vast machine were awakening. Alara kicked upward, but her light flickered and died. In the darkness, she felt a presence rise beneath her. Then everything went still. She awoke on the surface, coughing, gasping. Her boat drifted beside her, half submerged, the equipment scorched. A passing fishing crew spotted her and pulled her aboard. She didn't speak for hours. When she finally did, the words felt like someone else's. "There's a temple down there, old, alive." The fishermen exchanged glances, but said nothing. Days passed, then weeks. Alara recovered physically, but her mind remained elsewhere. She avoided the loch, spent hours reading old Celtic manuscripts, legends of water spirits, ancient gods. One passage stuck with her. The loch keeps what it must. When man forgets the pact, the guardian wakes. Not out of malice, but out of memory. She realized what the whispers had meant. Something had been disturbed, not by her, but by the centuries of sonar scans, the dredging, the tourist subs, the arrogance of human curiosity. The Guardian had tolerated much, but now it stirred. She tried to warn the local research centers. She published her findings. Most dismissed her. Only Duncan believed. He gave her one last warning. If it rises again, it won't be alone. In the spring, strange things began happening. A sonar team from Edinburgh vanished. Their equipment was found floating miles from their last known location. A cruise boat near Fort Augustus reported a massive shadow beneath the hull, far larger than any previous sighting. And then, the dreams began.